Hi, my name is Jason Bartlett. I'm an ACP2 with Queensland Ambulance Service. Today I'll be recording my PAR 5440 exemplar video number 3 on the insertion of a pneumocath or a needle thoracostomy in the setting of a suspected tension pneumothorax. Okay, to locate the landmarks for the point of insertion of a pneumocath, there's two ways we can do that. Firstly, we can find the jugular notch. We can then move our fingers down onto the manubrium, find the sternal notch, and immediately inferior and lateral to the sternal notch will be the second intercostal space. Alternatively, if we can't find the second intercostal space that way, we can palpate the clavicle. Immediately deep to the clavicle lies the first rib. We can roll our fingers into the first intercostal space, find the second rib, and from there we can find the second intercostal space. To identify the mid-clavicular line, we find where the clavicle articulates with the sternum and where the clavicle joins the acromion process. Find the midline. Typically in males that's going to lie slightly lateral to the nipple line. An alternative site to the second intercostal space mid-clavicular line is the fourth intercostal space anterior axilla or the fifth intercostal space mid-axilla. Both of these alternative points lie in what they call the triangle of safety, which is bounded by the pectoral muscle anteriorly, latissimus dorsi posteriorly, the fifth intercostal space inferiorly, and the axilla. And the triangle of safety is so called because it minimises the chance of damage to any of your large arteries or veins, your subclavian, brachiocephalic, any of your pulmonary vasculature, and it's actually superior to the diaphragm, so it reduces the chance of injuring your diaphragm as well. So I'll give a practical demonstration of insertion of the Cook Emergency Pneumothorax kit, which is used by the Queensland Ambulance Service. The kit consists of our 12 gauge pneumocath. So the idea of the 12 gauge pneumocath is that it provides a large enough diameter to release blood and air from a pneumothorax. What's not provided in the kit is 10 mils of normal saline, which we draw up into the provided 12 ml syringe. So we'll draw 5 mils of normal saline into the provided 12 ml syringe. The idea of this being that as we insert the pneumocath, we apply gentle traction backwards on the syringe, and once we've actually penetrated through the pectoral muscle, through the parietal pleura into the pleural space, we'll see bubbling of air and aspiration of air, which is a positive confirmation that we're actually into the pleural space, and hopefully we'll decompress the pneumothorax. So using aseptic technique, we'll prepare the area. So we've identified our landmark, second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. On this mannequin, due to the limitations of where I can actually insert a pneumocath, it's probably going to appear a little bit medial than where it would be on a real person, so ideally I'd probably be a little bit more lateral, but the mannequin only has an insertion port that's so wide, so I'll probably will be a little bit more medial than would be ideal. So the procedure to actually insert the pneumocath, using your non-dominant hand, we form a small insertion into the second. So we want to roll over the third rib, the superior surface of the third rib, to avoid the neurovascular bundle that runs along the inferior surface of the second rib. So we want to avoid being near the inferior surface of that rib so we can reduce the chance of damaging that neurovascular bundle. Make a small incision, and we rotate the pneumocath perpendicular to the chest. With our dominant hand, we're applying traction on the syringe until we've penetrated into the pleural space. We'll get positive aspiration of air. At this point, we don't advance the trocar any further. We actually advanced the pneumocath off the trocar. So we inform our team we're about to have sharps out, have an available sharps container, and sharps away into a sharps container. At this point, once we've had positive confirmation, we can secure the pneumocath using the provided flange and tie, and we will attach the provided extension tubing that comes with the pneumocath. It does have a valve, so we have to ensure that the valve is open to facilitate the release of air or blood from the pleural cavity. And then we can also attach the one-way Heimlich valve, which facilitates air release from the pneumothorax, but not the air returning into it. Several ways that this can then be secured onto the chest, to the anterior chest wall. You can either use tape or you can use the tegaderm oxides. Due to the fact that this patient's most likely going to be quite profusely shocked and diaphoretic, I like the idea of using a tegaderm because it gives you a larger surface area to bind to his or her anterior chest wall. And once we've actually completed that, we use the tape provided with the decompression kit, and we sticky tape the Heimlich valve to the chest wall inferior or below the level of the actual pneumothorax to facilitate drainage of blood or fluid out of the chest wall. In the event that you don't have a Cook pneumothorax emergency kit available, or within the Queensland Ambulance Service at an ACP2 level, we are actually indicated to do a 14 gauge emergency decompression of chest in traumatic cardiac arrest. The procedure is very similar. We locate the jugular notch, manubrium, sternal notch, locate our second intercostal space. Using aseptic technique, we prepare the area, taking a 14 gauge. Now the problem with the 14 gauge as opposed to a pneumocath, so sharps out, is that the actual length of the stylet in a 14 gauge in some male patients, some female patients may actually not be thick enough to reach through the pectoral muscle, through any adipose tissue, to penetrate through the parietal pleura into the pleural space, and it may actually be an unsuccessful decompression just purely based on the length, whereas the pneumocath is a good 50% longer again than a 14 gauge. Procedure is very similar to the insertion of a pneumocath. We've positively identified our second intercostal space mid-clavicular line, rolling across the dorsal surface or the anterior surface of the third rib. We actually roll forward, as I said, again a little bit more medial than would be ideal, but it's just restrictions from the mannequin. And at perpendicular 45 degrees we push the 14 gauge cannula into the chest wall until the stylet is sitting against the skin. Sharps out, we remove the actual 14 gauge straight into a sharps container, and in theory we should feel a release of air or possibly some blood and some fluid from the 14 gauge. These don't need to be secured in any way. If you do secure them, you actually run the risk of occluding or kinking the stylet. They can be left in situ as they are, just being aware that the risk that they can be knocked out and may need to be reinserted. A couple of troubleshooting tips: if you're doing a needle thoracostomy, we can always, and it becomes occluded, and the same can be said for a thoracotomy. If the thoracotomy becomes occluded and the tension of the pneumothorax is recurring, we can take a 10 ml syringe filled with some normal saline, and we can actually attach it to the pneumocath. I won't do it because it's got electrical gear inside. We can actually push 10 ml of saline through either the 14 gauge needle thoracostomy to try and remove any of that potentially clotted blood inside or any blockages into the 14 gauge, and also into the pneumocath. We can disconnect the overflow port and flush 10 ml of saline straight through it, see if that resolves the problem. In both cases, if that doesn't resolve the recurring pneumothorax and we've still got an occluded pneumocath or needle thoracostomy, we can actually insert a second one slightly medial to, slightly lateral to the existing pneumocath or needle. Alternatively, we can try our alternative insertion sites.